back. We're looking forward, B'ez Hashem, to continue the 10th epistle, Igeres HaKodesh, the segment Igeres HaKodesh. We're holding on page Kuf Tes Vav, about a third from the bottom. This is the original text of the Tanya Kadisha, the original Sefer. Pretty much to the bottom of the page, the line starts Hatayda. We're holding Ach Hainu Dafka L'Shemer Hatayda. So for that matter, wherever you're watching it, on the original website, they have the text on a separate scroll bar. It's established that way. It's easy to follow. And of course, it would begin at the very beginning of this week's presentation. That would be on the TanyaOnline.com website, TanyaOnline.com. There's always that that impetus to review, take time in the present class to review the past, in order to get the flow over here. However, it's just so easy to connect to the previous classes. I believe this is the fourth class on this Igeres, on this epistle, and the previous class is just a click away. The more recent class is on the higher side, of the left side of the website. On the left side of the site, there's the scroll bar with all the previous classes. For that matter, mentioned we merited to conclude, to learn the entire Likutei Amorim, Shaykh B'Mona, Igeres HaTshuva, and it's up till the 10th where we're holding. And again, the more recent is on top of the site, on top of that list, and therefore it's really a click away to see the spirit of this chapter, and or to understand this chapter and the entry into today's class. It's really would take a few seconds to do so. I will just add, overall, we periodically, and of course for the newcomers, present the overall distinctiveness or the overall difference of this study of the Kuntras Achen, Igeres HaKodesh, and the Kuntras Achen. Even there's the distinction between Igeres HaKodesh and Kuntras Achen itself, but they're different than the first three segments. We know that Tanya Kadisha has the 5 segments we once mentioned. It's given over Mideir L'Deir, that this is with precision. This is the Teiresh Biksav of Teiresh Achsidus. As such, 5 segments corresponding to the Chamishi Chumshei Teira. But there's a difference, of course, between the first 3 segments to Igeres HaKodesh and Kuntras Achen. We had a little presentation on this, quite a few times in different classes, but at the very beginning of this very epistle, the first class on Igeres 10, the 10th letter, we had some backdrop. So if you're a newcomer and you want to appreciate it a bit, this which we just point out, it's the very beginning of that class and the understanding of the chapter itself. There's these few classes, it's easy to tap into them. So we'll begin immediately, of course, try to, with maximum brevity, just to point out a bit what is the Alter Rebbe contrasting this Ach Hainu Dafka L'Shemer HaTeira, which we're continuing at this time, that this is precisely to the one who guards the Teira, V'loi Sor Mimena Yaminu Smail, and does not budge from the Teira, nor to the right, nor to the left, Afilu Kimoli Nimo, even like a strand, even the measurement of a strand. Bring him here. We want to meet the individual who is Shemer Teira, Leisar Mimena Yaminu Smail, nor to the right, nor to the left. That itself says, to the right and to the left would probably be doing Teira exactly with Teira demands, not to overdo it. Is there such a thing, overdoing it? Of course not. Overlearning? No. The more you learn, the more you're connecting to the Nice and Teira, the more you're Mekayim, fulfilling the mitzvah, the greatest mitzvah of all, which is Talmud Teira Keneged Kulam. More davening, of course you're doing something positive, but Yaminu Smail, it's sometimes when a person has to learn Teira, and he has a shir in Teira, and he's going to start davening at that time. Of course, there's a smile there. So the Yiddishkeit ought to be very structured, because we have to make sure that we're doing what we're meant to do, fulfilling the ultimate goal and mission of which HaKadosh Baruch Hu mandated us, each one individually has their particular setup of the shlichus, even though the common denominator that we're all learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, but there can't be a mixture. There has to be, the precision, the time to daven is the time to daven, time to learn, to do the mitzvah if someone is in need of help, as an example. So I want to overlook that opportunity which Torah gives me and Torah demands from me at that time to help the other party, spiritually or physically. But no, I want to rather engage in the delight of prayer, Torah. So then again, there's a smile there also. We understand that being an Eved Hashem, there's a lot of precision. We're servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're soldiers in Hashem's army, if you will, in context of the precision which is demanded from every Yid to serve Hashem. So there's Yeminu smile that, and here we're talking about someone who guards the Torah, doesn't veer from the Torah, nor Yeminu smile, even Kiblei Nima, even the size, in the measurement of a strand. Like I said, bring him over. It would be great to see such a beautiful Yid. Can it exist? Yes, it can exist. If Torah tells us about it, of course it can exist. But what is he saying over here? Why is he bringing this special Yid, which is a Shemer Torah and doesn't budge even Kimlei Nima? This is in context of the very beginning of this chapter, the very beginning of the Sigeres, which Alter Rebbe writes, there's two types of Chesed Eilam and Rav Chesed. The Chesed associated with Eilam, which would be one way or another measurable Chesed, even though it's Chesed, meaning to say it's about the manifestation of God's reality, of God's light, of God's benevolence, the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which that's why Torah is called Chesed. Miminei Eish Das Lamei. There is a Yemin, the main idea of Torah, like he explains. And of course, we're taking the time to a bit recap towards the very beginning. That's why Torah is Mechuna B'Shem Chazdei Hashem in the Lashon here of the Alter Rebbe, because this is the kindness. This is not only kindness, this is a revelation, a manifestation of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Torah is all about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a very finite world, and he wanted through Torah to introduce himself, the infinite dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, Hashem created the world. Someone's going to say, "What do I have to learn Torah? Let me just play a Scrabble game on the table." And the Scrabble game is created by Hashem, and the table is created by Hashem. So I want to connect with Hashem. So why do I have to learn Torah on that table, or learn Torah in period? If I could just deal with matters of world, which is worldly matters, also created by the same Creator. The same Creator gave the Torah. But we know it's not so. We give the example a few times that someone someone's invited to make a presentation of an important figure and an intellectual, and he comes in, say this very brief, we gave this example a few times, and he takes off his coat and asks one of his people, "Hang up my coat," and then he comes in and starts his presentation, his essay. Someone wants to repeat, was asked to repeat. So what did you hear? Could you share some insight? It would be foolish for him to say, "Oh, hang up my coat," and then go on with the repeat and review of that essay. No, the hang up the coat is coming from the same party, the same individual, the same vocal cords of the same person. But no, that doesn't demonstrate who he or she really is. That's something that everybody does. That's inferior. That I see you use the terminology inferior because this is the Lashon in Kabbalah, that there's Asara Mamoris, the 10 sayings through which Hashem created the world, and then there is the Asaras Hadibres, which is the Hashem. It's an insight to Hashem Himself. This is the revelation, the Anechi Hashem Alekech, the revelation of the most deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lashon Anechi, we mentioned many times, it's not only Alekim Hashem, but it's the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which was revealed on that very special day of Matan Torah, and imbued in part of every part of Torah we learn, and every mitzvah ultimately we do. Of course, there's a difference of Torah mitzvahs we learned in the past. Torah is even a greater union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even vis-a-vis mitzvahs, but mitzvahs are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They have that similarity that this is a revelation, this is a manifestation of Hashem Himself coming to the fore. When I put on tefillin, when I put on mezuzah, I light a candle for Shabbos, I learn Torah, and so on and so forth, or every mitzvah, in particular when it comes to learning Torah, that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. The hanging up the coat would be similar to Hashem creating. It's called milin de Hedyeta. That's our mamaris are called, literally translated, cheap words. This is not who Hashem does not come across. In other words, of course, Hashem, the idea of creation is, you see the godly reality because the sophistication and the complexity of creation. There could only be a creator which could create this, understandably so, but just focusing on creation is like someone focusing on, oh, he said, hang up my coat. Yes, the mandate of the Yid is to fuse the two. We mentioned a few times, L'shem yichud kutshabrichu shchinte. We fuse the inner workings of Hashem with, that's why Hashem put us over here. Didn't tell us to learn Torah on some spiritual plane and do mitzvahs on some spiritual plane, which of course would not be possible. Mitzvahs are associated with the physical, but that's the message, to fuse the two, the spiritual and physical form of matter, and ultimately the kutsha brichu ushchinte, the Hashem, the way it forms by himself, the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with this which in the end of the day becomes the Asara Mamoris, which creates creation the way we know it, and we imbue that Ein Sof. In other words, there's the fusion of the two, the Yichud Kutshabrichu Shchinte. In the end of the day, the world itself is meant to demonstrate that oneness, that inner oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes to fruition, of course, through Am Yisrael, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, become the Oil HaGoyim, the light upon the nations, to introduce to the nations of the world the godly message, this which is directly pertinent to them, known as the seven Noahide laws. But at the end of the day, Hashem Melech al Kol Ha'aretz, Hashem's reign would be felt on the entire land, not only in all the minds of the Torah learners or in their Bati Midrashim, the Kol Ali Yeshiva by Hashem Melech al Kol Ha'aretz, because at the end of the day there is the fusion of the two. There's meant to be that fusion. That's the whole purpose of creation. Not to take much time, because we spoke about this so many times in these classes. So the whole idea of Torah is Chazdei Hashem, to introduce the Ein Sof into the world. Yet Torah has another dimension, which was Eish. Mimine Eish das Lamai. Again, you got to see it a little more with elaboration. Again, if you're new over here, to see the message in the previous classes, that there's the mention of Gevura. And why so? Very briefly, that Torah has to enter into a finite world. Of course, there has to be the idea of Gevura. Again, I'm saying this very briefly. And therefore, mitzvahs also come through very evidently through this channel of Gevura. The fact that all mitzvahs have their measurement, mitzvah, connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, embrace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, measurement. Why are we measuring an embrace? Answer, because Miminei Eish Das Lamai comes through the channels of Gevura. And Al Tereba goes through a whole list. And of course, it's really, every single mitzvah has their measurement. Al Tereba doesn't go through all the mitzvahs, but he gives a very considerate list over here, that we can see how mitzvahs are so much associated with time and space, and in other words, measurement. Even the karbonis, which is, iconic way of a Yitzhak Hakadosh Baruch Hu, even there's measurement. What type of animal, the female, male, which carbon, the age of the animal, and there's so many details and so many intricate details when it comes to bring your carbon onto the mizbeach, because there's the Eish dimension, because there's the Gvura dimension. Again, we're saying this briefly. This was very much of the message of the previous classes, and here the Alter Rebbe goes on even to the mitzvah tzedakah. Tzedakah measurement. Apparently, if I have the money, I'm going to give as much as tzedakah as I want to. Where's their measurement? No, look in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, you have to give meiser. A tenth is an obligation. 20 is mitzvah, and a muvchar mitzvah to do the mitzvah in a choicey manner. It's from 10% to 20%. Can a person give more? Not so simple. From the perspective and the angle of tzedakah itself. Tzedakah should be measured. For that matter, the Alter Rebbe says, that itself, from all the mitzvahs, apparently tzedakah would be the last idea, that there would be a measurement for tzedakah. Again, see it in the previous classes. But at the end of the day, there's a gura idea associated with every mitzvah, including tzedakah. And with this, the Alter Rebbe goes into the idea of chesed olam, with which he began the Igeres. That's a chesed which is limited with the parameters of olam. The Lashon Alter Rebbe chesed kel kol hayom, that the Yidden do tzedakah, Yidden do kindness one with each other. Hashem reciprocates with His chesed, and yet it's called chesed olam because the world on its own is limited. You know, Rebbe brings the famous medrash, the world, the limitation of world, from world to one heaven, and from one heaven to the other, going through all the seven heavens again of the Gemara, the medrash we brought last week, because you're dealing with a scene, a backdrop of the finite, of limitation, finitude. And therefore the chesed is also measured chesed. And therefore, as he says, the words before, nitin shiru midu gavakim mitzvah, there is a measurement to the mitzvah tzedakah b'chesed, in the kindness shabbatayda, just like any other mitzvah of the Torah. So again, to get into today's class, you have to see it a little more, elaborate. Again, it's a click away. So Alter Rebbe continues. This is to somebody who guards the Torah, doesn't budge from the Torah, nor right nor left. I feel like even in the size of a strand. Like we said, of course, this is stupendous. A yid should be not to shemet mitzvah sermon yamin usmel. I feel like but categorically, this is the chesed olam which one connects to when he or she are doing everything right. And here the Alter Rebbe says sometimes we have to tap in to this chesed, Rav Chesed, which is a different chesed. We have to resemble this Rav Chesed because of certain circumstances that we created. And basically the Alter Rebbe says that when everything is okay, we gave the example, your car is working and there's no leaks and everything, you put in a certain amount of gas and it'll take you for many, especially it's a newer vehicle, it'll take you for many hundreds of kilometers. But if there's certain leaks and there's certain, fragmentations in the, in where this gas, as an example, has to flow and has to make the difference, it's not enough just to fill up the tank. It'll start leaking and you have to do certain things in order to make things happen because of these fragmentations. And in this case, when the Yid, in his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is fragmented. And as such, there are different cavities, as an example, which needed to be filled through that shir and Torah, and it wasn't. It needed to, in other words, the energy of Torah had to connect with that part of the neshama, the chokhmah of the nefesh, as an example, through that shir and Torah. And Rahman, the person skipped that shir and Torah. Or the mitzvah, which was most supposed to make a difference, because it's not only we voluntarily do the mitzvahs, but every mitzvah has a time and place, and not only time and place for the individual, but there is that mandate that the Yid has demanded from him, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at that moment. I need you for the shleimus of your nefesh to put on tefillin at that moment. I need that home to have a mezuzah. I need that candle to be lit now, this Shabbos, not next Shabbos, this Shabbos, as an example. And when the Yid, Rahman al-Islam, doesn't do what he or she is meant to do, they cause a cavity, if you will, in their nefesh. And then, on the overall, they establish a fragmentation between themselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what are you going to do? You're going to do the regular chesed? For example, the context of tzedakah, it's not going to work. And this is, at this point, one has to introduce in their avodah this Rav Chesed, because they need to draw a new light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a new type of Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the Alter Rebbe explains later in Perek Yud Gimel in Igeres HaKadosh. We'll look forward to Hashem. We're 3 chapters away. Very, very uniquely explained by the Alter Rebbe. The difference of regular Chesed and Rav Chesed, namely, Rebbe explains there that Rav Chesed comes from an area, in the terminology of Kabbalah Chassidus, L'mayla Miseder Ishtalshel, beyond the order of evolution. which the order of evolution itself, remember, we have to remember it's Hashem's order of evolution. We have the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, there's a infinite dimension to this chesed. It's coming from a God which is infinite. But nonetheless, it's still part of the order of evolution, and therefore, somewhat there is the counterpart, for example, of the chesed, or rather the midah which counters that chesed as an example. There's the gvura, which limits the chesed, like we see over here even in Torah. There's mina and there's eish. It's because it's coming from the regular or the normal setup of Seder Shtalshus, even the world of Atzilus, which really that's where Hashem's spheres are. We spoke about this so many times. Hashem's midas are in Atzilus, and then every midas, of course, carries the weight of the Ein Sof, but nonetheless, it's part of the order of evolution, and therefore, it doesn't carry that limitlessness in comparison to the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. The expression is less small b'hayatika in Atik, which is the level, explained so many areas in Kabbalah and Chassidus. This is the area of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, the way Hashem is for himself, by himself, even higher than expressing himself through the spheres. And that chesed has an infinite proportion, meaning to say there is no proportionality when it comes out of chesed. It's bli gvul. It is a chesed that there's no nothing countering that chesed. There's no gvura which counters that chesed, less smala, which would be gvura b'hayatika when it comes to the chesed of Atik. And we must, of course, draw this important light in order to fill in all the cavities which the person himself created because of their lack of subservience of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when it needed to be expressed in the learning Torah, and they're fulfilling Hashem's mitzvahs and doing everything that Hashem wants them to do in the precise time, in the precise space and setup and so on. When a person doesn't do that, it's not enough. They'll get back to it next week or the next day. They cause a cavity, a fragmentation in their relationship, which needs to be dealt with. It's a little bit like, in medical terms, very briefly, the shock treatment. We don't do the shock treatment on an average day, even though it's an enormous infusion of energy coming into the body, into the system. So why won't we do it every day or every hour, as an example? No, this is when the body needs that shock treatment because it's lacking the normal energy, so you do that in order to get things going. There's a certain similarity over here. You need the Rav Chesed, you need that infinite light, that infinite energy to come into the person's system, fill up all the cavities which were caused by the person's unfortunate choice not to heed, not to align themselves with Hashem's desire. When Hashem asked him, yes, today I needed you to learn Torah, today I needed you to daven, today I needed you to do that mitzvah or that mitzvah, and you didn't, so there was something, you caused this cavity that right now there's in your neshama space which is lacking in energy, which was meant to come in. At that point, you open up that overall faucet. You need to have that faucet, meaning you need to have the hamshacha of that chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would be called the Rav Chesed, the limitless chesed that would come in and fill in all the cavities and be able to establish, align the Yid's connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the pattern, to realign himself with the pattern of learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, everything that Hashem demands from every single Yid. Alei Adomis, every day they live in this world. Like post-shock treatment, the person, starts regulating themselves, if it's their diet or if it's their way of life and so on, in order to be able to live normal. But you need the shock treatment in order to get that going. In this case also, chas v'chalillah, if somebody went off, veered from the right way of the derech Hashem, and they caused all these issues, if you will, so at that point they need hashbah of the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As not we're going to say, we're just saying this orally, we're going to see this all in the text, as we're going to continue. But how do you, Rebbe is namely saying, how do you get there? How do we turn on that important faucet? And we need it. Most of us need it very badly because most of us do not follow that Shemer Torah mitzvahs of Allah Yisar Mimena Yamin Ismail. We should, and we hope maybe one day we will, and we strive to be like that Yid, but most of us are in need of that Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to fill in all these cavities and to correct all those fragmentations which were caused by the Yid because of their lack of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how do we get there? How do we turn on that Rav Chesed? Answer: through our beyond extension in the context of the mitzvah tzedakah. No 10%, no 20%, as the Lashon Koil Asher Yitin La'ish Ba'ad Nafshei. As the famous Gemara, and Alter Rebbe brings it in Peri Gimel over here also, when one would come in as an example. So really this is, at the end of the day, the package of Tikkun HaNefesh. But this is what we're talking about. We need to do something to elicit the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to act in the same manner, to give tzedakah in a way of not the Chesed Eilam type of tzedakah, which could be 10%, 20%, which is a lot. But no, we have to act with the Rav Chesed, the Beligvul Chesed, Beligvul tzedakah, in order to elicit this Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to bring tikkun to our nefesh, correction to our nefesh. So, does it annul all the rules of tzedakah presented by the Shulchan Aruch? The Shulchan Aruch says 10%, and the Shulchan Aruch says, it's not so simple to give more than 20%. 20% is called already mitzvah mina mufchar, a choicey way of executing that mitzvah tzedakah. So what is the Alter Rebbe just saying? No, it doesn't matter what it says in Shulchan Aruch. No, the Alter Rebbe is saying there's two dimensions to the very mitzvah tzedakah. There's one dimension of the mitzvah tzedakah as it's part of the mitzvah tzedakah. It's part of the structure of the mitzvah tzedakah. One has to give 10%, and if he wants to do the mitzvah in a choicey manner, he would give 20%. But this is all part of the package of tzedakah, the way we know it, it's tzedakah being one of the 613 mitzvahs. This type of giving is not in the context of the mitzvah of tzedakah, it's in the context of tikkun nefesh, correcting the soul. One needs to fill in all those cavities which they themselves deliberately, advertently, and maybe even inadvertently, they cause that Hashem's the regular energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's meant to come in and connect with the neshama, did not, and we have to fill that in. So we have to be mesak in our nefesh. We have to correct our soul, and in order to do so, we have to give not tzedakah the way it's established with its parameters in the context of mitzvah tzedakah, but rather beligvul tzedakah, 20, 30, 40, koil asher yitin ba'ad nafshi. And this is the famous example that Alter Rebbe brings, the Gemara brings, and it's brought many times, and also in Sifrei Chassidus, and of course is as well Sifrei Musar. That if someone was ill, and he comes into a doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, I can cure you, but it'll cost $10,000, and that's the only thing the person owns, that's the amount of money the person owns, is going to start arguing $5,000 is, you can keep the $5,000, but I can't cure you under 10. So how much would a person be ready to give away from his money in order to cure himself physically? Of course, if he's saying, because what are you going to hold on to the 5,000 or even 2,000 or even 1,000? You're going to give the doctor 9 and you're going to hold on to 1 and he can't cure you. So, Rahman al-Islam, in a short time, there's nor you and nor benefit of the money. God forbid, of course. So a person said, take everything. What's going to happen after? We'll figure it out. But in order for me to live, I have to give it all away. And so too when it comes to tikkun hanefesh, as the Alter Rebbe says, what's the difference to that? For that matter, a serious person, a much more so serious yid, has to give more attention to the tikkun hanefesh, even more than the tikkun of the guf, correction of the soul, even more than the correction of the body. So how much would one want to give away to correct his nefesh? Of course, there is no limit how much one would want to do in order to mitaken his nefesh. And because if I had to mitaken nefesh, I have to act in this Rav Chesed manner in order to elicit the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not the regular Chesed, but that Rav Chesed we just mentioned. I have to do the same, give it all away in order to express that the Rav-ness, if you will, in other words, without any limitation in the midst of tzedakah, in order to elicit this Rav Chesed, to be misak in my nefesh, to correct my soul. Not to jump the gun over here, but just to see this, the sweetness in that translation of the pasuk, which the Alter Rebbe says on the surface should have said leisamu chasadecha. You see the first class, we asked the question, why does the pasuk say leisamnu? That nun is extra. Is there a typo or something? We say every day in davening, your kindness has never finished, if you will. In other words, it's never done, because it's you, and you're always around. Your kindness is always around. And this is the simple meaning of kilei samu chasadecha. And in the pasuk it says kilei samnu. What's that extra nun doing there? But the Alter Rebbe teaches so sweetly, no, that's not a typo. Kilei samnu. This is the message. Loi samnu has the connotation ein onu tmimim. We are not complete. There are fragmentations on our relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. There are cavities which have to be filled. Loi samnu. Therefore, chazdei Hashem. We have to act with the kindness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, emulate or do something which would be parallel to that infinite kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we're so desperate for in order to be metakin our nefesh. We have to do that in order to be able to appreciate that Chazdei Hashem, the Rav Chesed, as opposed to Chesed Eilam. So because Kilei Samnu, therefore, we have to act with that very Rav Chesed, which we're trying to elicit in order to be mesakin our nefesh. So again, the Alter Rebbe, of course, concludes this with the Pedic, putting the message in those words, again, so sweetly. But let's go on what we're holding with the text and see how much we can do. Today, this is precisely the someone who guards the Torah, like we said before. He doesn't butcher the Aval. Somebody veered away from the way of Torah, because he veered from his way to bring deficiency in the supreme holiness, literally translated. He minimized this energy which needed to come into his system. And not only into his system, we know that at the end of the day we're ambassadors in this world to bring the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into our society and our lot. And at the end of the day, every mitzvah makes an impact on the entire world. Of course, in the broader bracket of the reason why we were sent over here, to transform the entire world, the world to become an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's not like, okay, you want me to learn Torah in order to do that, you want to put on tefillin to do that, I'll do it tomorrow, and I'll go to learn even more maybe tomorrow. No, there's something demanded from you today to draw a certain energy into your system, and again, via your system, to be spread out to this which you're responsible for as a yid, with that overall mandate, and you didn't do that, so you minimized that ha'ara. As opposed to Elohi Hashem Torah Mekayim Mit Mikil Chasa, if you would guard the Torah and fulfill it the way the halacha demands from you. So there's an energy which is missing. So this deficiency and this wrongdoing could not be corrected only from this supreme light which is beyond the order of evolution, which we know it, the 10 spheres associated with the Eilam Ma'asav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we mentioned before, that Chesed associated with Eilam. You have to draw something beyond, because you have to fill in all this which was lacking and cause a deficiency in the Hamshacha which needed to come into your system and ultimately into the entire world. And it's of course not enough you're going to learn tomorrow, because tomorrow's learning, tomorrow's fulfilling the mitzvahs, tomorrow's putting on tefillin as an example, won't do for this which you were lacking today. To say, for example, someone has to fill in a certain amount of cups every single day, and they bring and they fill in today, and the next day they don't, and the next day they're going to come with the same amount of energy or the same amount of water, let's say, to fill in these cups. You just have a certain measurement, how many cups you could fill in. So you'll do today's, yesterday's, all this lineup of the cups will remain empty, because what you could have brought is just the measurement which you had in order to fill in today's quota. So what do you do about it? And of course, when you're talking about the nefesh, when there's a giroin, there's a real fragmentation of the nefesh as such. And it's truly problematic. So you have to come up with open up this enormous faucet, which is endless energy, and that would, of course, will not be limited to today's, tomorrow's, of the day before, and it would truly be able to fill in all this which was lacking. That is the Rav Chesed, which we're so much seeking from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to bring that shleimus to the nefesh, the tikkun to the nefesh, the correction to the soul. And therefore, to do that, as he says, the supreme light, which does not invest itself and is not, as such not limited to the parameters of Eilam, like the Alter Rebbe Taich, the Chesed Eilam we learned in the previous class, again a click away, which is called Chesed Ilah, the supernal Chesed, supreme Chesed, Verav Chesed. You see the word Verav, endless Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you should make a mispashim, it's unbelievable because that Chesed shines and is manifest in a manner of Ein Sof, true infinite, in infinite manner. Beligvul umido, without any border, without any measurement. On the onset, it's in Chesed, not associated with Eilam at all. Even though, again, we have to be careful. We spoke about this in the last class, that when we say Chesed of Eilam, it's also not just the regular Chesed. You're talking about a Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, especially as we pointed out. This is Chesed Atzilus. Atzilus is a world which houses the Ein Sof. Atzilus is not just a higher world. Atzilus is a different phenomenon than a different type of world, a different phenomenon than any other type of world which exists, not only lower, but it's, and again, which would make Atzilus a world higher than Bria. No, it's a different idea as explained in Kabbalah Chassidus. So the Sfiras of Atzilus also have this Ein Sof-ness, if you will. But nonetheless, the Midas of Atzilus, the Sfiras of Atzilus, there is a Midah and Gvul to them, one way or another, because it's a Chesed Olam, the Chesed of the world of Atzilus. Again, we spoke about this in the last class or classes in this chat, and this Geras itself. Here we're talking about a chesed which is not at all associated with Eilamis. And therefore the chesed is Rav, Ein Sof. The words over here, Beli Gvul Mida. No border, no measurement, because it's not mitzumtzum, it's not condensed, not associated with Eilamis in general, even the Eilam Atzilus, Makif Aleim L'maylo, it encompasses over all the Eilamis from on high. Mereish Kol Dargin Atzofa, because it's an encompassing kayach, therefore it's not limited to the on high. It's beyond the highest levels of the structure of Eilamis, and therefore it could rush down. It's not limited to only come into Atzilus and not to Bria so much, and less in Yitzira and less in Asiyah. No, it's an all-encompassing kayach, and therefore it's not limited at all, and it's not associated with Eilamis, and therefore it could have an impact on this lower world of Eilam Asiyah, and impact the Yid, which Chas v'Shalom, or Rachmana litzlan, heaven forbid, established willingly, deliberately, or even inadvertently, that fragmentation in her relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how could it rush all the way down? Maybe it would just stop in some spiritual world of Eilam Atzilus, even Bria, Yitzira, Asiyah, but come down into this world and into the neshama of somebody who disalign themselves with their creator? And the answer is, this is what the idea of makif, not only where the ayr comes from, something which is completely transcendent and not associated with Eilamis at all, but also reflects on the fact that it could rush down and come down to anywhere, because that's the point of a ayr makif, that it's not limited to the Eilamis where it comes from. It's limitless, potent energy, but also it reflects where it can come down. It's not limited and not associated with Eilamis, therefore it could come down to anywhere. Famous expression, when you talk about true infinity, 1 in a billion or a trillion ought to be the same, because the moment when true infinity is somewhat, use this terminology of excited, with a trillion or a quintillion or even a billion more than 10 or 2 or 1, it's not true infinity. From the perspective of true infinity, a billion, a trillion, and 1 is the exact same. As you can understand, Alter Rebbe explains this in the 48th chapter. It's worth to take a look of Likutei Amarim, the first segment. It's a click away as well. Because if it's truly infinite, 1 in a billion, if it's excited a bit more than a billion, more than the one, so of course it's not truly infinite. True infinity is 1 in a billion is exactly the same. And so too over here, because you're talking about an infinite dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, infinite chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rav chesed, makif, it's not at all associated with Eilamis. So when it comes down, it's not excited more with Atzilus, more than the Bria, and then Yitzira, and we'll let a little bit trickle down into Asiya. What about to the Yid who disconnected himself with the Creator? Maybe on a good day. No, when you're talking about the Makif of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the area which is completely removed from Eilamis, meaning to say this is a Rav Chesed, which is the true Ein Sof and believable of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Atzilus and Bria and Asiya, and even to the Yid who disconnected themselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the end of the day it's all the same, and therefore it could rush down. It's not even rushing down, because rush down would say yes, it appreciates more a higher level, and then it rushes down and it pushes its way through from one Eilam to the other, and then it would come down into Eilam Asiya and into the system, into the neshama of the Yid, which needs to be corrected. It's not even that, it's beyond that. It immediately connects with the neshama of the Yid, because where it comes from, the area of Makif, the all-encompassing dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that true Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore when you're able to bring it to fruition, or bring it to open up, that use the terminology of open the faucet of Rav Chesed, when you're able to do that, when you're able to tap into the Rav Chesed and allow the Rav Chesed to come in, it's right away going to come down and do and accomplish that tikkun nefesh immediately. But how do we elicit the Rav Chesed? The answer that we act in the same manner in the context of tzedakah, not associated with the measurement of tzedakah, the dimension of tzedakah associated with the mitzvah of tzedakah, but we do that Rav Chesed, a limited extension of charitable acts, goodness, kindness, and of course money, to tzedakah without any limitation. With this, we elicit the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's start again. As we just explained, when a person draws this light through his actions, through his arousal below, but again, it has to be commensurate to this which you want to draw. And in this case, this would be the mitzvah of tzedakah in a way of Rav Chesed type of tzedakah. So this supreme light shines and is manifest through all the elements and corrects everything which was the wronged over here. Ma'uvas would mean something which is a wrongdoing, a wrong accomplishment, a wrong ramification which came, or a negative result. Ma'uvas would be a negative consequence which came from one's actions, negative actions, or inactions there where they had to act in the context of mitzvahs aseh, and of course negative actions in the context of mitzvahs loisese. And all this which put this stain on the Kodesh HaElyon, on the supreme holiness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when you have that Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it renews their light and their tov with greater strength and with greater intensity. B'chinas chodosh mamash, like a totally new Therefore it says in the place where Baal Tshuva stand, Tzadikim Gemurim Me'enim Mechem Lamed. We'll stop over here in the text, but just 2 points over here. The way he concludes these words, what does it mean, Nitnu B'Kodesh HaElyon? You're talking about the neshama of the Yid, which you have to bring the tikkun of the neshama of the Yid. So why is this ayr coming toich oilamis? Why is it coming through all the worlds? We needed to come to the neshama of the Yid to fix up that problem which was caused through the Yid's actions or inactions. Why is the Alter Rebbe right that mispasha toich oilamis? And the answer is that we know that the Yid's neshama comes from the entire Seder Ishtalshus. Alter Rebbe writes it in the very beginning of the 3rd chapter in Likutei Amarim, that we have the 10 Sfiras Nishtalshulu Mihen. it ultimately comes from Eilam Atzilus, and the Yid himself comes from the Chochmah of Atzilus, the core of Atzilus, as the Alter Rebbe explains in the second chapter of Likutei Amarim, also a click away, worth to see, when the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Chelik of the Kami Mal Mamash, the Yid as the part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the way to the highest levels of that world of Atzilus, which is known to be the world of oneness, which we just explained, and again as well in the previous classes. So when a Yid, Rahman al-Islam, God forbid, does a sin, not only they cause or doesn't do what they're supposed to do at the time and they're meant to do it, to do that mitzvah, they cause this fragmentation, not only their neshama, but it's a lineup of chisarin, a lineup of missing energy throughout all the elements, through all the spheres. The famous word of the Magid, as he explained the Mishnah, which says Da Malamayla Mimach, which literally means you should know what's higher than you. As the Mishnah continues, there's an eye that sees and the ears that hears, and so on, and all your actions are written in the heavenly books. But the Magid says Da Malamayla, pause, that whatever goes on high is Mimach, is from you. And this Lamaila is in all the Elamis. And it says there's infinite amount of Elamis, but we know, namely, the Elamasiya, Elamitzir, Elamabriya, Elamatzilus, when a Rahman, a person does a sin, or doesn't do at the time that mitzvah which they're meant to do at that particular time, they cause this fragmentation on all levels, not only in their neshama, but in all the Elamis, which the Yid is connected to. So therefore the Alter Rebbe says, when you have to draw this Eir, it's mispasher toich ha Elamis, all the worlds. And of course, eventually ends up into your neshama, which needs that shleimus and needs that tikkun. That's number one. And that's why he says, Kol migrois shenitnu b'kodesh ha'elyon, not only referring to the neshama, but the lineup of the neshama till on high and to the highest levels. And he says, V'chadash eiron v'tuvan b'yeser eis v'yeser oz, b'chinas eir chadash. Why plural if you're talking about that yid's neshama? The answer is, again, you're talking about all the eilamis. And that's why it says, eiron v'tuvan. And the message, again, it's a total new light. The Alter Rebbe brings over here this idea in the end, again, of this which we're learning today, this famous Gemara, the place where the Baal Tshuva stands, the Tzaddik Gomer cannot stand. Because, and in brief, this is what the Baal Tshuva is all about. Baal Tshuva is constantly, for that matter, tapping into this infinite energy. As we know, the Baal Tshuva, as Alter Rebbe explains in Pedic Zayin, Likutei Amarim, also click away, a very, very fundamental Pedic chapter. In the first segment, Likutei Amarim, speaks about these experience of the Baal Tshuva, because he understands, he or she appreciates what they have accomplished through their sin doing or lack of the mitzvahs which they were meant to do. So they have that enormous passion to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that passion, that fervorous passion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the average tzaddik doesn't have. It's similar to someone who's healthy and they have a regular diet and not taking these strong medicines or so. It's the like we say, the shock treatment or that heavy medicine in order to get them going. They're eating the same tomatoes and cucumbers, they're doing the mitzvahs and so on, and of course that's the right way to do it. A person will always choose to be the tzaddik, not the Baal Tshuva, not to plan, so to say, a service of Baal Tshuva. I'll sin Sunday and Monday I'll do tshuva, sin Tuesday and Wednesday I'll do tshuva. Chas v'shalom, Rahman al-Islam. The Mishnah says, the Gemara says, if somebody who plans his avodas Hashem in that manner, it's probably not going to work on all levels. Tshuva is just something in hindsight, in retrospect. If chas v'shalom a person fell, he wasn't the way they're meant, he didn't act in the way he was meant, he or she was meant to act, then they do tshuva. So the tzaddik is the way that he has to strive to be, to do everything right, because we have a mandate in every day, in every hour, every minute, and every second. We are on the arena, we're meant to do what we're meant to do to fulfill our overall mandate, bringing Hashem that nachas ruach, that satisfaction, bringing about the overall mandate of establishing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu a dira b'tachteinim, a doma soul in this very world, that Hashem should feel comfortable in this world. And of course, it's a mandate which is not, as we say, the 3 times in the year, but every day, every hour, every moment, every second, every millisecond. And therefore, a person is to strive to be the tzaddik. But where do you have that enormous, passionate relationship? When you talk about the Baal Tshuva versus the tzaddik, of course it's by the Baal Tshuva, because they understand and appreciate what they have caused in their disaligning themselves with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And the enormous that the Alter Rebbe writes, and famously in the end of chapter 24, Likutei Amarim. It's worth to take a look. On what happens when a person does an Aveda. He takes the Reish Shomel, the head of the king, and brings him into the most unclean places. You look at the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe in the 24th chapter, he writes, in Beis HaKisei, literally, those are the words. That's where the Alter Rebbe finishes the Peirich of Dal. The Alter Rebbe's words are with maximum precision. And the Yid is able to meditate and contemplate on this, what they have caused through their actions. Of course, it becomes a burst of a passionate desire and love to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chas v'Shalom, not to fall away. It's like somebody who is constantly drinking water will never appreciate water like someone who was in a desert for 2 or 3 days. They were deserted, they were separated from the crystal cup of water, which brings so much excitement to at any given day when one is even a bit thirsty. Imagine someone who is away from water for a few days and how their appreciation to water, to a good cold cup of water, there's no comparison. Naim mayim kara al nefesh hayefa, as the famous expression. And the same thing about Tshuva, because they appreciate they understand what they have accomplished, and the moment they realize what happened, what they did, what they established through their actions or inactions, that drives them in a way that the average tzaddik does not practice on a regular basis. And again, you have to see it in Perek Zayin. The choice of words, Alter Rebbe, is just so beautiful. Perek Zayin, the seventh chapter in Likutei Amarim. So, if you think about the between the tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva, who constantly draws this Rav Chesed more? Of course, it would be the Baal Tshuva, because he just doesn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a measurable manner. But everything what he or she does as a Baal Tshuva is with that exceptional fervorous passion which they constantly express. Mimamakim krasich Hashem, from the depth of their heart, from the infinite dimensions of their soul, the deepest dimension of their soul, which is of course associated with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore they're constantly eliciting this Rav Chesed more than the tzaddik. And it's explained a number of places in that chapter in particular. But here, the Alter Rebbe brings it in because, in the end of the day, this becomes, so to say, the default avodah of the Baal Tshuva. But what does it mean to us as we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the straightforward way to elicit the Rav Chesed, as the Alter Rebbe is going to say, that is through committing ourselves to do tzedakah, the mitzvah of tzedakah, but not only from the perspective of the mitzvah of tzedakah, which is the 10%, 20%, but in the end of the day has a measurement, but to do tzedakah in a limitless manner, to give without any limitation, to extend kindness without any limitation, emulating that Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which that would be the Sirusa D'Lasata, that arousal from below, which would cause the Sirusa D'Le'elo, which is the arousal from above, not drawing the Chesed Eilam of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would accomplish everything which needed to be accomplished based on everything we learned over here in the Nefesh and all Elam Esaliyadim and so on. So Hashem help, we should be privy to that Rav Chesed with all the goodness and kindness which is done around the globe, particularly these days, and individually, collectively, and we should be zeicha to the Rav Chesed, which would make again a difference on all levels, not only on the spiritual plane, tikkun nefesh, shleimus of the nefesh, but all the brachas which are really a yid needs. And at the end of the day, we always need to tap into the Rav Chesed, that everything should go good on the physical plane, the material plane. And Hashem should help that we should be zeicha to the Rav Chesed. It should be manifest on all levels, spiritually, materially, and of course collectively, the Rav Chesed directly connected to the ultimate redemption through Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be b'mheira v'yameinu. Have a wonderful night.